Hi, I'm Eileen Roche, editor of Designs and Machine Embroidery magazine, and I'm here today to share with you some really cool ways to use an embroidery machine. You know, embroidery machines can do a whole lot of different tasks, like quilting for you, and making really intricate, tiny little pieces of what would normally be pieced quilting, and making it so simple. I normally like to start with a flat hoop, either a border hoop or a magnetic hoop. You can use a standard hoop, most certainly, and you'll want a quilt sandwich. So that's quilt top fabric, batting, and backing. Now, one tip, use a busy print fabric on the back because, after all, it is an embroidery machine. You're going to have some tie-offs on the back that you might find bothersome. So if you use a busy print on the back, no one will ever know. Those tie-offs will be camouflaged. So over at the machine, I've already selected my embroidery design, and in fact, I stitched the first color of the embroidery design, which is the quilting stitches. So we're going to be using quilting techniques completely reversed. We're going to quilt first and then applique. So I'm covering my quilt block with an applique fabric, and this is going to be raw edge applique. So if it's an item that you're going to actually use a lot, like maybe a lap quilt or a pillow or a bag, then fuse a product that's like a fusible web to the wrong side of the applique fabric. And then after the whole embroidery process is complete and the fabric is trimmed, you'll press the fabric to the quilt top. So we're just going to go ahead and let the machine finish here. We'll come back to the table and I'll show you the step outs that are included. So here is color 1 already stitched down, and at this point I add my quilt applique fabric on top. Notice the color contrast. This is really important. You most certainly want the spokes of the Lady Liberty block to really pop off your base fabric. So choose different values, not only color, but we have a dark value and now a lighter value. So color number 2 that we can hear stitching over there is this very pretty spoke and the spire that's on top of each spoke. I did, right at the hoop, trim away this curve. There's a stitch designating what to trim away, and then I lay my little square of yellow fabric right over top that hole, basically, and stitch my last color, which is a pretty stipple stitch, and it's going to tack that down. Next, it's time to trim away all this ugly excess fabric, and when you do, this is what you're finished with. And the beauty of this is all the trimming is done out of the hoop, away from the machine. Frankly, you can put on your favorite movie and do it. Now, you're going to need more than one block, so work with a piece of fabric that is maybe the width of the fabric, so we call that the WOF, W-O-F, and I just tear my fabric wide enough to fit into my rectangular hoop, and then I stitch my first block. And then I take a measuring tool and separate the blocks by 1.5 inches. And I'll continue to fill this strip with blocks until I have the number that is required to make my quilt. Once that's done, I trim the excess fabric outside of the block, and I place the 1/2 inch line of a quilter's ruler on the edge of the embroidery. And of course, these are quilting stitches, but I still refer to them as embroidery. And I trim away that excess fabric, and then I piece the quilt with a reversible piecing technique because, you know, it's quilted all the way through. As you can see on the back of this quilt, here's my reversible piecing technique. So let me walk you through that. You're not going to believe how easy this is. You're going to cut your sashing 2 inches wide, and I selected a 2-inch wide width because my seam allowance is a 1/2 inch wide. So your sashing strip will be 4 times your seam allowance width. So I have front sashing that I have placed right sides together with my quilt block, and back sashing that is also right sides together. And I'm going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now you'll notice here, I've used a completely different quilt block. This is my New York Beauty, one of my favorite blocks that I never was able to achieve with regular quilting techniques, but boy, it looks pretty good when done with an embroidery machine. So I sew with my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this is what I'm finished with. So on the front of my quilt block, I press this open. And then I take block number 2, and for illustration, we'll just use the side of this, and I take my second block and piece it right sides together with another 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then when I open it up, this is what I have finished. And on the back, you can see that the seam allowances are butted up next to each other in the middle, so this is all solid with batting in there. And then I go to the iron and I press this over and under, and then just stitch in the ditch from the front. So I make 1 unit such as this, and then I would add 2 more units. See if we can get these in a semicircle, or it doesn't really matter what your pattern is. These 2 units would be pieced together. And then again, same technique, now just with a longer strip of sashing, both front and back. That's the key. And you can piece as you go. The beauty of this is when it comes out of that hoop, it's almost finished. It's just a matter of piecing. I think you'll find that these steps are very manageable. You can do some intricate quilt patterns that no one will believe you did on your embroidery machine, and you'll have fun doing it. I have one more tip for you in finishing this quilt. You know, no artist leaves their work unsigned, and either should you. It's easy to document your quilt with embroidery by creating your own label. You can do that in the lettering program right in your machine, or maybe if you have digitizing software. But some machines have a tablet that connects to the machine that actually lets you draw right on the pad, and you could autograph it, or you could lift this this cover and place artwork inside and trace something. Like, in fact, this is supposed to be a handbag in the shape of a handbag. And I could have traced a drawing of a handbag. And then after I make my applique, many machines have an automatic applique feature built right into the machine. I would then fuse that fusible web on the back and then fuse it to the back of the quilt, and of course then hand sew the edges just to make sure that it's on there permanently. It's important to make sure that your autograph is on all of your work.